Halloween is a spooky time of year, whether it's playing classic horror titles like Resident Evil and Silent Hill, indies like Crow Country and Gone Home, or even horror visual novels like Higurashi and Chaos Head. October is very much the spooky season. However, if you're an AQUAPLUS fan, 31st of October marks the anniversary of a title quite unlike any of these. I'm talking about one of the most unique and obscure strategy RPGs I've ever played. That's right, it's time to discuss Tears to Tiara II. Tears to Tiara II, Hao no Matsue, is a strategy RPG co-developed by AQUAPLUS and Sting Entertainment, who are best known for other franchises. Tears 2 marked unfamiliar territory for both developers back in the early 2010s. For AQUAPLUS, Tears 2 was one part of a free-title lineup exclusively for home consoles and not PC. This was due to the Japanese PC market shrinking considerably at the time, which forced AQUAPLUS' hand. The other two titles were a new Deuteragonist game, later becoming Mask of Deception, alongside a sadly cancelled Bishoujo visual novel named Jasmine. As for Sting, Tears to Tiara II was one of their first RPG collaborations with other developers, following their departure from their original series called Department Heaven. While other collaborations like Dungeon Travelers and Midou Monogatari 4 are more well known, Tears to Tiara II is one of their more underappreciated works. Tears 2 also marked new territory for ATLUS USA, the localization company that brought the game to North America in October 2014. Tears to Tiara II was, and still is, among their most text-heavy localizations to date, alongside the likes of Persona 5, Growlithe: A Wafer of Time, and 13 Sentinels. It was their first visual novel localization ever, alongside their second AQUAPLUS localization, following 2013's Aquaparsa, also on the PS3. Tears 2 was also the first AQUAPLUS title that ATLUS sublicensed to NIS America for a European release, marking AQUAPLUS' debut in the PAL region. Something that's old territory, however, is for key staff. Given this is an AQUAPLUS title, many company veterans worked on Tears 2 in some capacity. This includes the director Kazuo Ninomiya, who worked on several AQUAPLUS titles released in the mid-2000s to early 2010s. Veteran singers Rena Uehara and Suara are among the various vocal artists who sung lyrics for Tears 2's many vocal tracks, which are composed by the likes of Naoya Shimokawa, Junya Matsuoka, and more familiar names. One of the newer staff is an illustrator called Tatami Honjo, who also worked on Dungeon Travelers and the Utah sequels. With all that out of the way, let's talk about Tears to Tiara II's setting. Tears 2 is set in a fantasy world on the brink of war. The ruthless, cruel divine empire dominates the continent, including the kingdom of Hispania. Hispania's last heir, Himilcar Barca, must rise and liberate his kingdom from the empire's tyranny, alongside his goddess Tart, who descends to earth down from the heavens, and many other unique and colourful characters. They all work together to liberate Hispania. Tears to Tiara is set in the same world as the first two Tears to Tiara games, Garland of the Earth and its fan disc, The Secret of Avalon, respectively. However, while those two games are set in an alternative version of Brexit Britain, Tears to Tiara II is set in that world's equivalent of the Western Mediterranean. Let's get a key question out of the way. Do you need to play the other Tears titles first? The answer, for the most part, is no. I say most part, as there are a few scenes with returning characters, including Arawn, the protagonist of the first game. However, as most of these interactions do not occur with Tears 2's core cast, it's okay if references to these games go over your head. You do not need to know their backstories to understand what's going on with the core cast of Tears 2. It's worth noting that as of October 2024, the first two Tears to Tiara games are not officially available in English. There is a fan translation of the original 2005 adult PC version of the first Tears title, one of very few AQUAPLUS games to be fan translated, but this isn't really accessible for multiple reasons. If AQUAPLUS localise Garland of the Earth and The Secret of Avalon in the future, you may wish to play them first. After all, many AQUAPLUS fans who have played them recommend playing the Tears series in release order. However, if your only options are between playing Tears 2 or not playing the series at all, you can start with this game. And this is because Tears 2 tells a tale that's very much worth experiencing. It's a character-driven strategy RPG at its core, and the character arcs, most of which are told concurrently throughout the story, aid world building. The main highlight by far is Hamil and Tart's romance. Hamil and Tart are the deuteragonists of this story, and they fit this role really well. It's a connection that transcends the boundaries between goddess and follower, which Tears 2 initially plays on heavily at the start. Tart is a goddess of war, so it makes sense for Hamil to call for her aid as part of his rebellion. However, they soon become inseparable, in both the platonic and romantic sense. Their adoration for each other forms the glue that holds Tiers 2's story together, for both the happiest moments and the most devastating of blows. Part of this is due to Hamil and Tart's opposite personalities. Hamil is quite seriously minded and can be very sly around his foes. On the other hand, Tart is a bit more laid back, curious and optimistic in comparison at all times. However, both are really kind and supportive of their friends and allies. You can definitely rely on them to be by your side. Outside of their romance, one key aspect of Hamil's character is his power to summon Melkart, a demonic being that slumbers within him. If Hamil loses control of Melkart, the world will turn to ash. If that sounds familiar, he's basically Rean Schwarzer AQUAPLUS edition, but told in one game instead of 4 1/3. I think the learning to control a mysterious power character trope can really help drive a story when it's told well, which is the case in Tiers 2. Moreover, it's not just Tart that supports Hamil. Throughout Tiers 2 Tiara II, you meet almost 24 allies, most of which become playable. Here are some of my favourite characters. Firstly, there's Karis, a young girl who's known Hamil for many years and serves as Tart's priest. There's Aeneas and Monomachus, two mature, knowledgeable men within Hispania who work to build a rebellion behind the scenes long before the events of Tiers 2 Tiara II. I also liked Alyssa, a noble from Port Helcart, who joins Hamil's rebellion alongside her loyal servant Daphnis, both of whom are pretty badass by the way. There are many more characters and I like them all. They have a great chemistry and help make Tiers 2 Tiara II a memorable journey. As for the antagonists, they are more of a mixed bag, depending on which angle you look at it from. From a character perspective, the best villain by far is Isabel, a malicious woman who Hamil vows to slay in battle. This conflict provides much of the tension for the first half of the game, and it was fantastically done. As for the main antagonists in the second half of the game, while they lack this personal connection to the cast, and by extension the player, in comparison to Isabel, they make up for it from a story perspective, as defeating them forms part of Tiers 2's epic, satisfying climax. Speaking of the story, unlike many of my typical JRPG reviews, because Tiers 2 Tiara II is a visual novel, I will include a trigger warning list. Given this game is rated PEGI 12/ESRBT, Tiers 2 is quite tame compared to many other visual novels. Content wise, it's more akin to your average strategy RPG, such as Fire Emblem, Tactics Ogre, and Growlancer. So here is the list. Character deaths, including blood, oppression, famine and plagues, religion, ecchi scenes, reincarnation. Now it's time to touch on Tiers 2 Tiara II's gameplay systems. Battles occur on a grid where your character has to complete an objective in each battle, usually routing the enemy, defeating a boss, or even enduring multiple rounds. There's an elements triangle, the ability to buy and upgrade weapons at your shop, forge and buy items, and more. If you've played a strategy RPG before, many of these features will be immediately familiar to you, so I don't really need to explain them any further. However, I do need to explain a couple of unique key features though. The first is the chain stock system. As you give and receive damage, you build up stock in your chain gouge. Once a stock is full, you can use it to perform one extra attack. In Tiers 2, you start with 1 chain stock, but can increase your number to 4 the more you level up. It's very similar to the Zeal system introduced in the Deuteragonists sequels. The second is Hamil and Tart's transformations. Throughout each stage, Hamil and Tart have their own gouges at the bottom of the screen. Once each gouge is full, Hamil and Tart can temporarily transform into Melkart and Tanit respectively. They effectively become tanks able to deal devastating blows to enemies in rapid succession. However, these transformations only last for 2 turns. Once these turns are over, Hamil and Tart become fatigued and hence more vulnerable to damage. Part of Tiers 2's strategic gameplay is knowing how best to use and optimise Hamil and Tart's alternative forms. Moreover, because Hamil himself struggles to control himself when he is in Melkart's form, he sometimes goes berserk and attacks friends and foes alike. It adds some much needed depth to an otherwise simple battle system. However, what really helped Tiers 2's gameplay system stand out are the fast forward and turn rewind accessibility systems. If you make a mistake in battle, you can rewind turns and try an alternative set of actions to see what works. It's worth noting that percentage changes are not changed when you rewind. Hence, if a character misses an attack, rewinding will not magically change things, so your characters carry out an attack the next time round. Moreover, you can change the difficulty at any time during battle. Outside of story mode battles, you can also partake in battles on the world map between your party and other NPCs. You will need to do some throughout the story in order to grind and level up your characters, alongside unlocking rare items from chests. All these features culminate in Tiers 2 being among the most accessible strategy RPGs I've played. It reduces the time you spend restarting stages, given you can rewind difficulty and play on a lower difficulty on the harder stages. You will want to do this at some point because Tiers 2 is hard on its normal difficulty. This is okay and is frankly essential once you consider Tiers 2's length. This game is so bloody long. Of all the games I've played this year, Tiers 2 is among the longest I've played, and arguably a bit too long for its own good. To contextualise things a bit more, How Long to Beat shows beating Tiers 2 Tiara II's main story takes around 55 hours, which is about how long my playthrough was. Tiers 2 is easily among AQUAPLUS's longest story-driven games. It's about as long as the previous Tiers games combined, but shorter than the Deuteragonists Master Duology. Its length is also comparable to Two Heart 2 and White Album 2, AQUAPLUS's other big PRVNs. Tiers 2 is a heavy time commitment, which is partially why it's taken me so long to get around to this game. Does Tier 2 justify its long playtime? For the most part, yes. While the opening chapters are slow, they do a great job of setting up the core conflicts of this world alongside the main cast. Chapters 5 and 6 are easily among the best in the game. Chapter 6 in particular ends with a very satisfying climax that's so well executed the game could have ended there and I would have been very happy, in spite of the plot holes. However, it just kept going. Tier's third arc, from chapter 7 to chapter 9, is where I really began questioning this game's length. I really wasn't sure where Tiers 2's story was going at that point, and that's partially because the plot points set up in this part of the story don't make sense until the very end of the game. This portion of Tiers 2 felt a bit aimless, and it was easily the lowest part of my whole playthrough. Fortunately, the final chapters of Tiers 2, from chapter 10 to 12, returned to the highs of chapter 5 and 6, which not only upped the stakes for a similarly epic climax, but also wrapped up various plot points introduced throughout the whole game. By the time the credits rolled on Tiers 2, I was satisfied with this game's conclusion. However, I was also glad to see the back of this game, because I can't help but feel Tiers 2's story could have been told even better had AQUAPLUS adopted a more succinct storytelling style. Playing Tiers 2 Tiara II in 2024 is a unique experience, especially if you've already played the Deuteragonist trilogy as well as other titles from AQUAPLUS and Sting. There are multiple reasons for this. The first, and most important, Tiers 2 Tiara II built the foundations for the Deuteragonist trilogy. This is most apparent in the gameplay. The chain stock system is the foundation for the Zeal system found in the Deuteragonist series. Tiers 2 Tiara II's meaty postgame also served as the base for the postgame in the Mask duology. The Mask duology are renowned for their fantastic postgame content, to the point where some players came for Utar's story but stuck around for the gameplay because it's just so good. This is ironic, given Tiers 2 Tiara II is the other way around. The story is fantastic, but the gameplay is not as complex as Utar Warimono, and is a bit rougher around the edges. Speaking of rough edges, some gameplay flaws within Tiers 2 are fixed in the Utar titles, such as being able to save any time during the visual portions of the Mask games, rather than fixed points as in Tiers 2. While saving any time anywhere is more essential in Utar Warimono's comparatively longer visual sections, it's a vital quality of life feature you need in any game with lengthy visual cutscenes. This is something Tiers 2 would benefit from. The other main building block relates to the cast of characters. I see many similarities between Tiers 2's cast and the Deuteragonist Mask cast. The stereotypical drunk, the eccentric monarch, the wholesome, supportive child, as well as a massive animal mascot are core character tropes AQUAPLUS return to in the Utar sequels. Moreover, each character has their own arc told concurrently, in a way not too dissimilar to Mask of Deception. From this angle, Tiers 2's character arcs are like Deception minus all the fan service. In a way, this makes Tiers 2's character development arcs superior. As Utar Warimono's characters are more well known, many people will sadly overlook Tiers 2's characters, which is a shame. Tiers 2's characters are memorable on their own merits, and gel well within both the Tiers 2 Tiara universe and the more light-hearted storytelling style AQUAPLUS adopt for the majority of their games. Another aspect worth touching on with Tiers 2 is the passage of time. When Tiers 2 first came to the West, its critical reception was mixed. This is partly because Tiers 2 was among the first visual novel stroke SRPG hybrids ever localised into English, alongside Ayu Senki for World Conquest in 2015, also for the PS3. Yeah, you probably didn't even know that was a thing, which is not surprising given it was digital only. This is because ATLUS marketed Tiers 2 Tiara II as a strategy RPG, not a visual novel. Therefore, many JRPG fans and critics alike were both surprised and disappointed by Tiers 2's vast quantity of text. Given how niche the visual novel genre is, I'm not surprised. ATLUS had to target SRPG fans to sell Tiers 2, even though they knew many of these fans dislike visual novels. Some see this as a necessary evil to grow the genre outside of Japan, something that other companies like AQUAPLUS Games have been criticised for in the past. ATLUS continued this strategy throughout the 2010s, when they marketed the Utaramno Mask sequels as well as 13 Sentinels from Vanillaware. It's only recently that localization companies like ATLUS and AQUAPLUS no longer rely on this marketing tactic, which speaks volumes about how much visual novels have grown outside of Japan. If the Tiers series returns, newcomers are more likely to react positively. Speaking of a possible Tiers 2 release, it's time to touch on this game's legacy. Starting with the English-speaking world, Tiers 2 helped establish AQUAPLUS outside of Japan. Back in the mid-2010s, their presence was fairly minimal, and this is why Tiers 2 is best remembered as a strategy RPG on the PlayStation 3, a console widely seen as the weakest Sony home console for JRPGs. Hence, a lot of JRPG fans overlook Tiers 2, although those that have played it consider it to be underrated. However, I would argue as a result of everything I've said, Tiers 2 is actually underappreciated rather than underrated. On the other hand, Tiers 2 helped AQUAPLUS cement their direction as an all-ages console visual novel developer in Japan. Tiers 2 is well regarded among visual novel fans alongside strategy RPG fans alike, including veterans of the first title, in both Japan and overseas. However, Tiers 2 doesn't have the legacy or impact of the first Tiers title. Their 30th anniversary trailer is proof of this, with Tiers 2 merely being a footnote alongside Dungeon Travelers and Aquaparsa rather than its own portion like the first game. As time goes on, the Tiers franchise has yet to come back in any form. Well, why is this? In Volume 0 of AQUAPLUS's new fan club magazine released in early 2024, AQUAPLUS confirmed a prototype for a new Tiers 2 Tiara game exists at the company. However, AQUAPLUS lacks resources to make a Tiers 2 Tiara sequel alongside their other projects because of the size of the developer. Given that many of their projects from recent years are both more profitable and necessary to grow the brand in and outside of Japan, inevitably more niche projects like a new Tiers title ended up on the icebox. These various projects include all those Japan-only Utaramno spin-offs, those multi-language Steam ports in collaboration with Shirobune, as well as the all-new projects revealed at their 2024 Great AQUAPLUS Festival. On a more positive note, given that AQUAPLUS have publicly expressed a desire to revive their older IP, I believe the Tiers 2 Tiara series will eventually return in some form. When Tiers 2 finally comes to other platforms, I will shill this game. If you like visual novels and strategy RPGs, I definitely recommend checking out Tiers 2. I also recommend this game if you love the Utaramno series and want more games like that. However, actually acquiring Tiers 2 these days is quite difficult. ATLUS no longer holds the license to Tiers 2, meaning physical copies for the PS3 original are quite pricey nowadays, and it's hard to track down. Until AQUAPLUS re-releases Tiers 2, your only other option is emulation, because you can't get it digitally anymore. Unless you speak Japanese and have a Japanese PS Plus premium membership, you can actually stream Tiers 2 alongside all of AQUAPLUS's other PS3 titles to your PS5. But I reckon if you're watching this video, you probably don't have the means to actually play that. Regardless of whatever hoops you must travel through to play Tiers 2 Tiara 2, much like Hamil and Tart's Revolution, Tiers 2 is a slow burn that's worth following through to its conclusion. This is both a great game on its own merits and an interesting gem within AQUAPLUS's rich back catalogue, despite its shortcomings. Moreover, it's accessible to both strategy RPG fans and visual novel fans alike, serving as a good entry point into both genres. Who knows, you might end up becoming as loyal to Tiers 2 as Hamil is to Tart. That too would be pretty sweet.